and welcome to the Queermunga Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Queermunga Institute is an independent, nonprofit anthropological research organization committed to the study of consciousness through the ancient practice of ecstatic trance postures, based on the work of our founder, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as part of our mission of the Institute, is to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. And so as an institution, we recognize to thrive, we must take an open approach. So we invite scholars of parallel research in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And we continue to look at the connections in ancestral wisdom traditions, revealing insight into the spirit of humanity. What did the ancestors know and how did they know it? One of the major differences between how Western cultures and indigenous cultures perceive is the relationship to the ancestors. And almost all indigenous traditions keep the accumulation of wealth of knowledge by keeping it alive, by imparting it on to those who are interested, to their young, instilling the work so that the work continues throughout history. And so today we're looking at an ancient method of navigation, ancient navigation traditions of reading the stars, the waves, the birds. And so Laura, I'm going to give you the honor of doing today's introduction.
Thank you, Paul. It's so fascinating to think of how our ancestors read their environment. And I've talked to pilots who talk about reading the strata and the winds and the clouds to understand the skies that they flew. We have in Kihei and Maui, before going out on the outriggers, there's so many outrigger clubs in the North Shores of Kihei. You join those and they will sing the chants before taking you out, and it adds so much to the experience to think this is such an ancient and a sacred task. And to think of how they embodied the knowledge, how they instilled the memory codes, how they passed the knowledge down from generation to generation. We have a guest who has been initiated into the very old tradition of reading the waves, the birds, the sea, the stars. And you may know him best from his hosting of This Old House some time ago. But Steve Thomas has an early history as a blue water navigator, sailor, and a filmmaker. He was fascinated by this ancient tradition and looked up the last of the elders who held this knowledge and started this immense archive and study with them over about a year's time. And so Steve joins us from Maine, where he's building houses and reviving the old history of houses. And Steve, thanks for being here today. This is the second interview with you.
Yes, it is. I don't. The first one was a long time ago. I can't remember when that was.
You've written The Last Navigator, the book.
Right.
You've done the film. Tell us your story and where this began.
Well, I think we can. If you want to go right to the slideshow, we can just do that. And I will. Do you mind if I poke my finger into the screen to
indicate where to?
Okay.
Yeah, indicate what when to. And I've got it here too, so I can. And what I'll do is roll through this, fairly quickly, and then I'd like to bring in Jet Dee, who has been working on the archive. We'll hear all about the archive in a sec. And she's been working on the archive for the last year. She's a sound engineer and became I'll let her tell her story, but she became fascinated with this and has been working on the archive. And then Thomas Raffippy, who I hope will jump on, and he'll join us as well. He's from Satawal. We'll see some pictures of him in the slideshow. He helped me translate as a young high school graduate. He just graduated he was just going to graduate this first year I was on the island, and the second year I was on the island, he just graduated. So he's obviously deeply interested in this material because it's his own history and culture, and very much on the brink of extinction right now. So The Last Navigator refers to this guy named Mau Piailug, who I studied with. I am best known for this old house. Did that from 1989 to 2004, then did Renovation Nation on Discovery's Planet Green and the History Channel. So I had a long career in television. Started out as a builder and renovator, and still am a builder and renovator. People say, when are you going to retire? I think I'm probably going to retire and expire on the same day. So I grew up in California, sailing and surfing. After college, raced out to Hawaii, sailed the boat back to San Francisco, then went off and became first mate of this boat, 103-foot schooner, here pictured in Boston, and a couple other boats. And it was on that return trip from Hawaii to Tahiti, from Hawaii to San Francisco, that I became intensely interested in navigation. I sailed a 43-foot sloop from England to San Francisco, down through the Panama Canal, the Galapagos, Marquesas, back up to Hawaii, and then across to San Francisco. And I had read about the navigators of Polynesia and Micronesia, but I actually lost my taffrail log on this voyage. And I started judging the speed of the boat by eye. And I found, through sextant shots, that I got pretty good at it. And so that sort of gave me the hint that maybe I could learn this technique. So out in the middle of the Pacific here, vast stretches of water without, these days, of course, we're used to GPS telling us our latitude, longitude, altitude, and pulse, and the latest YouTube trend. Everywhere in the world, it wasn't always the case. There are vast stretches of the world that you had to actually understand the sea's own signs of land. Mau Piailug was most famous for sailing the Hokulea from Hawaii to Tahiti. I think we've got a film clip that's next.
3,000 miles across waters he'd never sailed before. 40 days without sight of land. Yet his daily estimates of position were never more than 40 miles off. Many nights, it was cloudy, without even the stars to guide him.
So he was the guy I wanted to study with. And I spent a year doing preliminary research, then got a research visa and permission to go out to Satawal Island. You have to be committed to get there, because you can't just get on the plane. You fly out on the milk run at that time, eventually winding up in Yap. And then you take this steamer, this government steamer, on a 2-week trip out through the islands, and arrived on Satawal. The first year I was there, Piailug immediately took me on. I'd been told by all the anthropologists, don't expect anybody to teach you navigation. It's secret. It's passed only from father to son, or grandfather to grandson, or sometimes mother to daughter if there's no male in the lineup, and then the daughters teach it to their son. But to my surprise, Piailug began teaching me immediately, as if he knew that this was a fragile thing. The knowledge of navigation is oral, it's not written down, it's oral history. It's passed from father to son, and what I've called, a shining braid of talk. And Piailug understood the wave of change that was about ready to sweep over his island. And he taught me with immediacy, urgency, clarity, and precision. And also it helped that I was a navigator, so I knew what he was talking about. I wasn't a trained anthropologist, but I was a trained navigator. So, I could sort of see it from his point of view, and my frame of reference is Western navigation.
So did you pre-arrange with Piailug, or did you write?
No, I wrote him. So I ended up, I was talking to Ben Finney, who was the head of anthropology at the University of Hawaii. So this was 82 maybe. And he said, have you talked to this guy named Sam Lowe? He's, in Boston, and he's doing a film about Polynesian navigation, Pacific navigation. So he gave me his number. Sam I was in Salem, Massachusetts. He was in Cambridge. And he said, I told him what I was doing. And so he had just come back from a shoot on Satawal. This was 82. And so I worked as a consultant on that film because I knew the navigation. I had surveyed all the literature by then, and he said, well, here's how to get in touch with Piailug, but you just write a letter and it goes off into nowhere. But it turns out Piailug had gotten my letters, and he was more or less expecting me. And, you know, as I say, I got permission to go do it. You need a research visa, so I had to go to Washington and go to the embassy there and present myself to the, you know, the powers that be, and get permission. So this was the house I lived in the first year, and it was about graduation time, so the graduation dances, and it's like stepping back into a Cook engraving. It was really extraordinary. And this is actually Thomas Raffippy's wife at graduation. I've got a shot of Thomas as well. So if you advance to the next slide, I'll sort of quickly go through the navigational systems. It's based on the rising and setting points of 17 stars or constellations. And they set out, their rising and setting points set out points around the horizon. This is the first thing you learn in this exercise called numbering the stars. Mylap or Altair is which rises in the east, just north of east, is the principal direction. So you have rising Mylap and setting Mylap, and so on. We'll see that in a slide bit. So the star compass gives you a way to name the directions, to organize the directions. And so now you got direction. You can say north, south, east, or west.
Like points on a compass is how he's arranged.
They're like points on a compass. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that there are 32 points on the compass, just coincidentally. And the Germans, when they came down into the area, this was World War I, you know, had a mariner's compass, and that was divided into 32 points. And so the Satawalese and the Micronesia navigators said, wow, these guys know this is a machine that will tell us the direction of the stars. So it was just totally coincidental. You know, modern compasses are in degrees, and, you know, these old compasses are, you know, north, south, east, west, northwest, south, west.
I do have a question if you can go back. So they're laid out so nicely, like points on a compass. So they're spaced out, or were they choosing stars for their location, a tiny pinpoint, or were they choosing stars for their brightness, for their red?
They're choosing stars for their arrangement around the horizon, so that they could actually develop, you know, a star compass, what we call a star compass. They're not exactly where it's not as neat as it is, but it's taught. If you go like the next one, well, let's see. Yeah, go to the next slide.
The very next day, he began teaching me the names and positions of the guiding stars. He taught me as he teaches his own sons, as his grandfather first taught him. Piailug uses the coral to represent the 15 principal stars. As they rise in the east and set in the west, they mark out 32 points on the horizon.
So it's about orienting yourself in space, and it's relational. So if you know these stars, you kind of triangulate, and you kind of get a sense of where you are in this circle of the ocean.
Well, that names, so you need to name direction. So north, south, east, west, and all the stars in between. So now you've got the basis upon which to build a navigational system.
Right.
So in that slide, 2 slides back, the islands lie under various stars. So you can, if you can point the bow of your canoe at the rising Altair, you can get to the island that lies under Altair at rising. So now you've got a way to find 2 points in space. You can leave an island and then arrive at an island if it lies under this star. So that gives you a way to, just the same as we do. I mean, you can take your chart and you plot a compass course from point A to point B, and then you can sail that by referencing your compass. And if you can figure out a way to account for drift and leeway and bad steering and so on, you can, use that to arrive at a destination.
Okay,
So
question. So you have drift and you have seasons. So the
we'll
star-
get to that in a second.
We get to that. in a second.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So now you've got direction. You've got, if you know the courses between the various islands named by the different stars, then you've got basically a chart kit.
Yeah.
So let's so Piailug took off on the field ship and he went to Saipan to see his son. He said, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. He never came back, but he put me under the tutelage of Urapa, who's in the previous slide. Urapa is his brother. Urapa spoke excellent English and is really a stellar human being. He's dead now as well. So Thomas Raffippy and I worked with Urapa that whole first season that I was there. And Urapa is a qualified navigator. At that time, he had not been initiated in Po. I guess since then he has been, or was. Like I say, he's dead. And this was a huge boost to my research program to be able to jump right in and start learning this stuff. Next slide shows one of their sailing canoes named after the vodka Suntory. These guys love to drink. They drink all kinds of stuff. Whatever is alcoholic, they love it. And Suntory was in dry dock for repairs. I had purchased and brought down a bunch of rolls of sailcloth, which is in the next slide. I worked for a sailmaker in England, so I actually knew a little bit about building sails. And they said, "Oh, can you run a snowing machine?" I said, "Yeah, I can do that." Can you make sails? "Yeah, I can do that." So we sewed a new sail for Suntory. Didn't do it the way that they do it. I used Western methodologies, and the old man came by and said, "Oh, we don't build sails like that here in Satawal." And the next old man would come by and said, "Oh, we never make sails that way." So I started to get a little nervous. And then the first time we actually sailed out, we rolled the canoe out, changed the colors from red to yellow because it had a lot of yellow paint. So you use it, slide the canoe, and the next slide down these coconut frond skids and out to this offshore reef in the next slide to fish for the day. And Hood Sails had given me the sailcloth, so I put their sticker on it. And early on the run out to the reef, the top pulled out and everybody looked at me like, "Oh yeah, so you really don't know how to make sails." So we dropped the sail and I fixed it really fast. I was kind of sheepish and embarrassed. We sailed out, we fished for the day, and then it's tuna, skipjack tuna that you fish for out there. And then sailing back, we were a good mile ahead of everybody else. So they attributed their newfound boat speed to me and my sail making ability. I'm not sure that it was, but I took credit for it, and that advanced my stock tremendously. I mean, being able to do stuff in this society means a lot. I could run a chainsaw, I could make a sail, I knew how to wield an adze. So being able to do useful stuff really improved my stock on Satawal Island. So next slide shows now you got a series of layers here. So you've got Pafu numbering the stars, and then you can see the canoe like you saw in that little film clip. So what has to get drilled into your mind so that you can do it while you're tired and seasick and scared and any time of the day or night, no matter what the weather's doing, is you always have to know where the bow is pointing, where the stern is pointing, where the tom or the outrigger is pointing, and where the platform, the PEP is pointing. So they will drill and drill and drill and drill and drill, like you saw in that little film clip, so that you absolutely know, rising mile lap, setting mile lap, Willy Willy Fushmaget, and Wuni Wunderloop, the Southern Cross there. You just know where you are in terms of your orientation, north, south, east, west, all the time. So like I say, at night, if you know the direction that you need to head to get to the island and the star is rising, you can point the bow of the canoe at that star. If that star is not conveniently placed just above the horizon, there are a number of other stars that follow the same path. Are they exactly in that track? No, they're a little bit to the north, a little bit to the south of that track, but you learn where they are in this extensive, and this had never been recorded before, there's extensive series of systems that are, for lack of a better term, I just call them sailing directions. And we'll see some of that in a sec.
The islands are associated with the stars, so they have a map of the stars. They also have a map of where the islands are in their vicinity.
In
So
their
they're
head.
associating islands with star directions. So they have two mental maps overlaid on one another.
Well, yeah, a lot more than two. And we'll get into that in a sec. So if you advance to the next slide, that goes back to what you were talking about. You've got, and that system is called Wolfhanu, which means gaze at the island. So, and that's in a long series of chants. I sit on Satawal. I go rising my lap on Pulawat. I sit on Pulawat. I go setting my lap on Satawal, and so on. So you learn so that's your chart kit, basically. So the more Wolfhanu you know, the greater your voyaging range. I mean, you can't sail. I mean, now you can sail with your iPhone, right? If you get a signal, but before electronic navigation was as widespread as it is now, your chart kit was the limit of your voyaging range. If you had charts for the whole world, you could sail the whole world. If you had charts for the Pacific Northwest, that was it. You weren't going to sail off your charts. You can't.
Mm-hmm. So instead of
during
rolling out a chart, these are all mental charts.
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's all mental. And so this is called Pukala wave tying. During the day, when the stars obviously are not visible, you use the swells to keep the boat oriented. So in the Pacific and the Atlantic, in the trade winds push up big trade wind swells that tend to be very regular in their direction. And you check the direction of the swells in the morning and the evening against the stars. And then you can use the swells during the day to maintain your direction. So it's never quite clear cut that there's just one swell and the rest is all calm. There's 2 or 3 swells, and being able to read the water is the skill. Well, it's all skill, but being able to read the water and actually understand what the principal swell is, what the secondary swell is, and then what the knot or the bogobo is in between the swells. So this stuff was never recorded in Western literature before. And, they took me out and showed me this. And Laura, the other day in our pre-interview, you were asking about this tension in the water, because first day I was studying with Piailug, still on the ship sailing to Satawal. I said, so how do you, when the wind is calm and, how do you tell where the current's coming from? And he tried me to get to see this tension on the water. It looks like wrinkles on a face. And finally I saw it, because I grew up surfing and sailing and spent a lot of time looking at the water, but you finally see it. And so the key to Micronesian navigation is not only the whole knowledge, which is extensive, but these very highly honed skills of reading the natural signs of, what's going on in the water, what the current's doing. I mean, there's nothing mystical about the navigational techniques. They're techniques, you can learn them. I did. But there's plenty of other, it does overspill into an extensive spiritual system that's long gone, mostly long gone now. So if you go to the next.
One other quick question though, do they have 100 words for the various textures or patterns or reflections or qualities of the water and the waves, like the Eskimos would the snow? Do they have fine distinctions?
Yes, mostly with distance. So, and distance off an island. So you have we can say we're X number of meters or feet or yards or miles away from something, and we can measure it with instruments. And this last atolls, and we'll get into that in a sec. So if we advance a little bit, so if you go to, so this is your chart kit. This is Wolfhanu from Satawal. These are the different directions and the different islands that lie under the various star courses. So you've got Wolfhanu Satawal, Wolfhanu Lamatrack, Wolfhanu Pick, Wolfhanu Westphio. All the different islands have a different chart kit or Wolfhanu for them. Next slide shows this. This gets to your question: how do you? What's the framework? What's the organizational framework on which you can organize all this knowledge and the observation? And that is called atolls, which means to aim. And atolls is a completely mental framework whereby you place the canoe on the surface of the ocean. The island of departure is receding behind you, moving under the stars. The island, your target island, is in front of you, moving under the stars. I mean, in an ideal setting, you would be sailing, you'd have a fair wind and you sail straight to it, a fair wind and no current, but it's never ideal. You're tacking up and upwind, you've got some current, the wind is stronger or less strong, so you've got some drift. So the way they organize their chart, their mental chart, is atolls, and they use a reference island. So that'll be an island off to the side. And this is, again, is all prescribed in the sailing directions.
Right.
So you envision the island of departure moving behind you, receding, the island, your target island, ahead of you, you're advancing toward it, and you're moving under these various stars. So Piailug would, later on, the next year when we were sailing, said, okay, the atolls island is Westphio, where is it? It's under this star, and he would say, nod, say, yeah, okay, you're finally learning this stuff. So this is a huge mental load. You think about all the stuff that you got to keep active in your mind at once. You can't really go to sleep. You can never sort of tumble your compass. If you think of this as a big gyro compass that keeps you oriented in time and space, then if you ever lose that, you're lost. You're literally lost. You can't go back to your chart and see your last plotted position or punch up your position on a GPS. I mean, now it's cake, total cake. You got, 2 GPSs. They tell you where you are, how fast you're going, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just unbelievably easy now. So easy that up until recently, the US Navy was not teaching sextant skills anymore. Now they finally figured out that the Chinese are going to jam all the GPS satellites, and so they're teaching sextant now. Anyway, this is a talk I
Good to
gave.
have backups. Good to have redundancy. Yeah.
Okay, so then this is the atolls configuration for the most commonly made voyage, which is Satawal to Westphio. And Westphio is a uninhabited island. They call it the island of free chow, the kids do, because it's got a big fringing reef, and there's a lot of fish, and so you sail back and forth there with great frequency to fish. So you can see Lamatrack, which is the reference island, also called the Pwitack. The course between Satawal and Westphio is setting a Little Dipper, and it's divided into segments or atolls. The first atolls is the atolls of sighting. That's the stage at which Satawal is still visible. And the atolls of sighting is further subdivided into a number of smaller subdivisions that have to do with what you can see. The first one is called Ninagalele, which means one tooth. So the island just appears as this little nub that I had a hard time seeing until I trained myself to actually see it. So powers of observation are critical, and good eyesight is critical. to do this kind of stuff. And then that's further subdivided into a bunch of different smaller subdivisions that have to do with, you can see people on the beach, or you can see the beach, or you can see canoe houses ashore, and so on and so forth. So, there are many, there's,
Gradations as you're.
yeah, that are related directly to natural signs, stuff that you can observe that, we just don't bother with anymore. Not in all our culture. We don't have to, because we can rely on machines to do stuff, to, find our way, to make our phone calls and so on. So this next one is, so these are the sailing directions. This is where you really get into the nitty gritty of how do you get from island to island in different sea conditions. So this is the Satawal to Lamatrek voyage. Generally it's downwind, and in an ideal world, you just sail straight there under the setting of Pwitack. And but first you do what's called Fatanomuera, which is it's backsighting. We do this, on Western sailing vessels too. You sight back, and you can see that you're drifting off course in relation to the island. It's just basically range. You're using a range. In any harbor, if you sail into any harbor, they'll have ranges set up so that you keep this. It's like aiming a gun. You keep the two sights in the range, aligned, and you're on that line. And if it drifts off one way or the other, you're not on the line anymore. So you first determine the current, and then this shows two different tracks. This is actually from Lamatrek back to Satawal with no current. You stay well north of the island, and then it shows you another track for wind from the southwest. So all this, you've got these sailing directions for all the different islands. Next one is Satawal Pukala, which is the little turtle island. And next one is Satawal Pulawat. So these sailing directions, I spent a lot of time sitting with Urapa and then Piailug saying, okay, what are the sailing directions for Satawal to Pulawat? What are the sailing directions from Satawal to Pukala? What if the wind's blowing from, not blowing straight northeast? If it's blowing from the west, sometimes you get westerlies, and so on.
So these are your interpretations of their oral knowledge that they're telling you. You're putting it in a Western-minded chart, basically. Translating this into a
not really interpretation; it's a representation.
Representation. Thank you. Better word.
There's no interpretation going on. This was because we would sit in front of a notebook and I would write it. I would plot it out, and Piailug would say, "I said, is this what you mean? Where do you tack? You tack here? No, a little bit farther here." I mean, these guys can go back and forth between a Western kind of bird's eye view and a Micronesian canoe eye view or sea's eye view. But this is the knowledge. I mean, this is what you need.
Thrilling for them to see you put it into this form when they were worried about their knowledge being lost, and they were the last of the navigators in the whole Pacific. It must have been thrilling for them to see this recorded.
Well, it wasn't going to happen. I mean, I got there at kind of the last moment when the sons and grandsons weren't coming back, and nobody wanted to learn this stuff. And I'm this, Western guy, who knew how to sail and use a chainsaw and make sails and stuff like that. And I said, I want to learn this. I've got notebooks, I've got tape recorders, and I'll buy cigarettes and alcohol. And it's like, you're on, no problem. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, then you start to get into some really, well, these are all mnemonics, but this is this almost spills over into literature. So there's some of the other systems are Itimata, which are names of the seaways, and Jet. I don't know if you can, Jet has, she's an artist as well, and she has done this big chart of all the Matau, the names of the seaways, which
What
is
do you
quite
mean by a
beautiful.
seaway in the Pacific?
So the
What
sea
is a
between the path between Satawal and Pulawat has a name. The path between Satawal and Pukala has a name. That's a seaway. And the path between Satawal and West Vayu, that's a seaway. So the names of the seaways is also another way to remember direction. So the key to oral teaching and an oral body of knowledge is there. It's hugely redundant in terms of different ways to remember stuff. And iti matau. So you got the name of the seaway between Satawal and Pulawat has a name, but also has a direction. So if you somehow forget Wolfhanu because you're tired and confused and you haven't been sleeping for the last 3 days because you're navigating, then you remember iti matau. And then there's Pwitack matau, which is brother seaways. So it's seaways that are similarly aligned. So if you can't remember the direction on one of them, you can remember the direction on its brother, and that's Pwitack matau. Then if you actually you can advance a little bit. So this is another system that I recorded, Food Tower, which is star channel, literally means star channel. And when you arrive at an island or an atoll early in the morning and you don't want to hang off for the night, you can sail through the reef passages if you know Food Tower, star channel. You use a star or star direction and you line it up. And you can see in this first one, this is the range to get into the channel between Pulawat and Sao. You range on that little island, Alangalap, and Fushmagat, which is north. So that's Food Tower. Then next one is, this is Food Tower, Lamatrek. And so that's all pretty straightforward. Yeah, I get all that. And then you get into some stuff that's really interesting. So Pukuf is the next system. Pukuf was highly secret, but they said you need to learn it because you're a navigator. So if you advance to the next slide, and they say this stuff is, you go out there and you can see these things. You can see these things. So these are creatures that lie under stars, certain stars, that are arrayed around each island that appear to the navigator if you're lost. And they were placed in the sea by the spirits of navigation to aid the navigator when lost. And I have had serious discussions. They asked me to navigate and go, we went out to, Piailug wasn't there, Urapa wasn't there. And they said, hey, will you navigate? We want to go out and go fishing out toward this swordfish. And I saw a swordfish out there, and I asked Piailug, you think that's Tagalar? That's the name of that Pukov. And he said, yeah, I think that's probably Tagalar. That I've seen it too. And they will say, no, they're there. We've seen them. We've seen them a lot of different times. And you have this conversation. Well, are they always there? Well, no, they must go off and do something else. But when you need them, they're there. So there's a Pukuf system for every island. And again, that's something that is part of the navigator's toolkit. And then we got into, this is the end of the first year. And this is Pwitack, who technically was Urapa and Piailug's father, because he adopted the boys when their real father died. And I wish, can you ping Thomas again, please, Jet, and see if he's
Sure.
can join?
Yeah. I was thinking.
I knew about Etong. Etong is, and I would like Thomas to talk about it. Etong is the secret language of conflict resolution. They're in the form of these quite beautiful poems. And if you're a navigator, you need to know Etong because it allows you to resolve conflict. If you're wise, you know Etong. If you're not wise, you don't know Etong. Etong is the talk of light. The light of Etong comes into your stomach, which is the seat of knowledge and the seat of wisdom, and fills you, illuminates you with light. Color orange is light, and that's why you see the ladies in those dances rubbing them, covering themselves with turmeric because it brings the light into their stomach, or wisdom into their stomach. So I'd read about Etong in the literature. All the other anthropologists said there's not a chance in Hades that you will ever get taught Etong. There's no way. It's not going to happen. Forget it. So Piailug told me, and Urapa told me, keep your eye out for that man, Pwitack, and someday maybe talk to him and take him some gifts because maybe he'll want to tell you something. And of course, I forgot all about it until one day I saw him, bathing in the inner pool, the Leilulu, and he came out and he's got cataracts, you can see. And, he said, oh, you're Steve. I said, yes, I would like to learn Etong. And he looked shocked. And he said, how do you know about it? I said, well, I've read about it in the Western literature, but I'd like to learn that. He said, okay, I can teach that to you. You're a navigator. You need to know that. So if you just hit the space bar once more, you'll hear some Etong. So Jet has been going through the tapes. I have, 30, I don't know how many hours of tapes.
Over 50.
And cleaning up the sound. I didn't think anything of it. I had a little Sony tape recorder, a little cassette recorder. Didn't think anything of it. Didn't think, I knew that it would go, but I never knew that, this would be the last recording of a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got in 2004, I had all of this material in my house in Salem, Massachusetts, and it was becoming apparent that if I lost it, it would be gone. Thousands, 5,000 images, all the tape recordings, all the original notes and maps and notebooks and everything that I generated when I was on Satawal for those 2 years. Put it all in an archive at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. So I actually, it's deeded to them. It's open to scholars, qualified scholars, but not open to the public. Some of the images you can access via their website. It's this is making the new canoe that we sailed from Satawal to Saipan for the film in 1988. So they're hand carved. I mean, everything gets carved. You're not. It's not like Western technique where you're bending wood around a form.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So this is Pukala. This is the Turtle Island. You can just scroll through this. So these are some of the images. Obviously, there's a story here, but some of the images that are in the archive. So it became clear to Thomas Raffippy, certainly was clear to me, and Jet, that there was a huge body of material that needed to be scanned. So this is a voyage we made from Satawal to Saipan. This was for the film. And I think this is worth just,
I also think you've got the Hawaiian Islands there in the voyage. Piailug was very instrumental in the Hokulea
oh yeah, yeah.
voyage.
Well, he was the first navigator. I mean, they didn't have anybody. They were looking around for a navigator to sail from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1974, and there was nobody in Hawaii who, remembered the skills. And Piailug was introduced to them by Mike McCoy, and agreed to sail Hokulea. He told me later, I mean, this was in the early 80s, he said, my grandfather gave me the sailing directions from Hawaii to Tahiti. So it was somehow in the literature. It had been, and it could have been that, these guys, some of them sailed on Western vessels, like Tupaia was the navigator and chief that Captain Cook picked up on Tahiti and took him all the way back to London to show him off to present him to the Queen. And, from in the whole of the Pacific, he could give Cook the directions to all the other islands. So he was a navigator. So it could be that they just, picked some of these star courses up and entered into the literature that way. There's some speculation that it was in the lore and handed down from father to son through all these generations. I don't think that's true, but I think it probably got picked up and entered into the literature that way. So if you go to slide 68 and
There.
hit that, there's a little, so we went back to Satawal to sail from
Where do
Satawal to
most of the
Saipan.
people live on this island?
We live right, it's called the face of the island. It's from about a quarter of the way down, all the way down.
I lived and voyaged with him over the course of 2 years. He taught me how to listen to the talk of the sea. And now, years later, he invited me back to join him and his crew on a special voyage. His name is Mau Piailug.
So we want, we had set this up in '84 when I was there, and Piailug said, "Yeah, I want you to come back and do the film because I want my kids and my grandkids and everybody else to, to learn how important this is." And so it was a tough voyage. The wind was really blowing hard from the northeast, and it was rough. So you can click through and see some of the images. I mean, these are all pretty much gone now. I mean, most of these people are dead. The images can't be taken anymore.
Maybe
Here,
that.
click on this one.
Okay.
It is after dark before we finally go out to the waiting canoe. No stars are to be seen, and I wonder how Mau will steer on the 40-mile passage to the tiny atoll of West Faiu, staging point for voyages to Saipan. We steer north toward the point where the Little Dipper sets. Mau tells me he follows a slight swell from the rising star Altera, but it's so slight I can hardly feel it. Yet just after daybreak, we make a perfect landfall.
It works.
So we'll just to play a couple more clips and then we'll jump out. If you go like advance 2 more.
By the 4th night, the strain of fatigue is showing. While the rest of the crew sleeps, he confides in me he's uncertain of our exact position. We're now in the bowl formed by Saipan, Guam, and the islands between. This makes the seas lumpy and hard to read. Sleep deprivation has made his memory, his only guiding chart, shaky. But then, his confidence seems to return.
If it storms tonight and the wind turns strong, we'll return to sail under the star Polaris. I don't know if the wind will get stronger or we'll see a little storm. But if not, then we'll spear Saipan halfway between Ulithi and Wule by tomorrow night.
You can see how rough in this clip. You can see how rough it is.
But the next day, we're not where we thought we'd be. We're puzzled. We see an island, but we're not sure which it is. Mau concludes it's Rhoda. We must have sailed far slower than he thought, but perhaps there's a current following the strong northerly winds.
So it was indeed Rhoda. We tried to weather the eastern tip of Rhoda and we couldn't get around it. So Mau decided to turn back and go to leeward. And fortunately, the wind freed up a bit. So we were able to spear Saipan on one tack. And if you hit this one, then you'll see us coming into Saipan.
Landfall's a strange time for a sailor. You're still of the sea and not quite of the land. The scent of it teases you. According to custom, you must approach an island, its chiefs and spirits, with respect, so as to enter its spiritual fields of power gracefully. For the last 5 days, and over the course of 6 years, I've been a voyager in their culture. Now, the young men of Satawal are going to become voyagers in mine. I know that upon reaching shore, everything will be different. The film crew has a schedule to keep. The people of Saipan are waiting to honor Piailug as their hero. We will dissolve as a crew, and the fragile moment of our camaraderie will roll away and be lost, like the thin wake of a canoe at sea.
It must have been thrilling to put all that knowledge to the test.
Oh, scary. It's a big open ocean. And it was hard. You know, I had a film crew, you know, we had the helicopter, you know, there was a lot riding on it. So it wasn't, you know, we had one shot, literally one shot, one opportunity to get this done. So if you just flip through the rest of these pretty quickly, we can get back, and I'd like to get Jet on. This is Thomas and some of the high school kids graduating. Fatanomuera, I recorded a bunch of his stuff. Aeoweiung, he said, I've sat and waited for my sons and grandsons to come back, and nobody's come back. He was blind. And so now you're here. He said, what am I going to do? Go up into the sky and take my knowledge with me? And you know, so these guys all realized that that was the last moment when they could record their knowledge. All these guys are dead. Everybody's dead. So this is kind of a lost world now. And I was fortunate to be there at just that moment in time when they wanted to teach me and I wanted to learn. I had the time to do it and the skills to do it. And Piailug is now dead as well. He died in 16, I think. Yeah, so that's it. So the project we're doing now, we're going for funding for it, is to keep Jet,
Focused.
give her enough money to,
Hi,
so
Jet.
she can
Yeah.
afford to scan everything. All these images have to get scanned. All the tape recordings are on original media. And so Jet, why don't you talk about it a little bit?
Well, I haven't been to the archive yet because of COVID protocols. It's been, all of the campuses have been closed to students and faculty. And I'm not a UH student, I'm an independent scholar, but I would like to go to UH and go through Steve's archive entirely. And I'd like to digitize everything, basically. I'd like to scan all of the slides. There's like 47, there's over 4,700. So it's a lot of time sitting there, and everything has to be touched up afterwards. Everything has to be, scrutinized carefully, and all of the documents have to be scanned and digitized that way. And everything, what we'd really like to do is create a new book with the material, and that's what we're seeking to do. And then, of course, there's the audio library, which I've been working on for the last, I started over a year ago at this point, working on all of that material and digitizing it to an archival standard so that it will survive, for generations coming forward. And yeah, that's our project, is where we want to give the knowledge back to the people of Satawal and to give it to them. At the time that Steve was there, the culture of learning was just beginning to change, and education was changing, and people were becoming literate, whereas, Piailug and his peers were illiterate and could not read. But could Urupa read, Steve? Was Urupa literate?
Yeah, he could, because he worked
Okay.
at the hospital.
Yeah. He might have been one of few people that were in Piailug's peer group. He was younger than Piailug, but he was literate. But everybody else could not. Everything was just memory only. Well, now everyone is literate, and most people speak some English. So it's important to represent the knowledge in a way that conforms to the way that they're learning now, and instead of the oral tradition, which it's really too late in the time frame to reinstitute that, because it's just gone. And so perhaps if we adapt the way that people can learn the knowledge, perhaps the knowledge will be learned, is my hope.
Steve, you also translated yourself. You also created an orthography of spelling of the language from their language to English as you were learning it. And you say now there's an official one that has to be reconverted. So all your notes have to be, again, adapted. What's the full scope there?
Right. So, there wasn't an official orthography at the time, so I made one up and tried to stay consistent. It was pretty much phonetic. Now there's an official orthography for spelling Satawalese words. It's become a written language now. It wasn't written at the time. So the translations need to get checked, and that's where Thomas Raffippy comes in, because he did a lot of the original ones, but he's the only native speaker. He's also now in his mid-50s, one of the elders of the clan, of the clan that Piailug and Urupa are from, in Pwitack and Aeoweiung. So the recordings have to get checked. All the Satawalese, my orthography has to get converted into the now official orthography. The reason we want to do a book is that, on Satawal, there's no internet connection. A book is the only way to represent this stuff. Also put it on a website so that the recordings and the photographs, this is still very much a work in progress. We're just, trying to get some funding for it now.
I would hope also that you would bring it out to the rest of the world to. With some,
because it's not available,
more films, and take it to museums. Maritime museums would love this, and anthropological museums would love this. That bring it out to everybody, because this is a fascinating body of knowledge to understand how this can be encoded with memory codes, with memorization, with the oral tradition, how this was structured, the mental maps, the layers of information, the magic chants, as you call them.
Well, no, they're all magic chants, actual magic chants. I mean, there's a whole body of magic, both, beneficial magic and black magic, that was practiced There's stories of bad sorcerers on Satawal Island that would destroy canoes at sea with magic chants. And one guy, I can't remember his name now, but this is in one of the stories that Urupa tells. He was discovered to be casting magic spells on canoes at sea and destroying them. So they
Why?
went to his family. Well, I don't know, because he's a bad dude. They went to his family and said, "Can we kill him?" They said, "Yeah, go ahead." So they hunted him down with spears and killed him. So I mean, this stuff is all in the literature. Aeoweiung, had dozens and dozens of stories that we
You wrote
recorded.
down all the stories that you
Yeah, and I never, the navigational stuff is in the Last Navigator book. It's still in print. It's gone through a bunch of different printings, and we got the rights reverted to us, and now we just print on demand. So you can buy the Last Navigator.
I have an old copy.
You do. You have one of the old copies. Thomas wants, now that it needs a revision now, which I'm doing, and Jet has been incredibly helpful in that.
Good work.
The orthography needs to get corrected in the Last Navigator, and the names, which I changed as per anthropological custom, should be changed back to the original names. I just made up a bunch of names, so those all have to get changed back. And then, so that's the Last Navigator, and the systems, a lot of the systems that you saw in the slides are in appendices in the Last Navigator. But all this other stuff, all of Aeoweiung stuff, a lot of Etong and so on, has never been published. And
That's
Tom,
a valuable record.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas thinks it's time to publish it and make it available.
Mm-hmm.
And so the media on which it's recorded is fragile. I don't know much about this, but Jet knows all about it. Some of the tape stock I used was Ampex, which is self-destructs. Other of the tape stock is a little more robust, but it all has to get digitized. All the photographs, now every one of them is historic in value, just because I was there pointing a camera, and you can't do that anymore.
Right.
And so they should be
Nobody's
scanned at high
singing those
resolution.
chants now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's gone. The people are all dead. So those need to get scanned at high resolution. And then really, the whole body of material needs to be gone through. Some of it probably shouldn't get published for a while, until another generation of people are dead. But a lot of it should get published. So, it's a big, the good news is that it's all there.
Mhm.
And I had the foresight to put it in an archive where it's climatically controlled and fire protected, and it's not sitting in my basement. So it from a funding standpoint, you're not doing original research. You're taking an existing body of work that's complete and intact, and preparing it for publication. So,
Conservation. Yeah.
and I'd like to also just note that Jet, who I've never met except on Zoom,
Mhm.
found me out of nowhere.
I was
And-
going to ask what your interest was. in
Well,
Yeah. What's your
let her tell the story.
Yeah.
It's actually a very long story. And it's a very weird story, but I had just kind of been looking for special knowledge that just kind of tied everything together. I knew that there was something that just explained everything that I wanted to know and that I wanted to learn. And I knew that I would find it when I found it, or that I knew I would know it when I found it, rather. And but I didn't know what it was. And I looked at quantum physics, and I looked at ancient calendarial knowledge, and that I discovered from studying ancient weird esoteric religious practices in Heian period Japan. It was a really weird journey to basically find the last navigator, but I basically just stumbled across it and found it and realized this is the knowledge I've always been looking for. And Steve wrote this book, and I'd watched him on TV since he started. I was watching his old show before he was even on it. So I couldn't believe that this guy had this knowledge, and I could have touched it 30 years ago and just didn't realize it. So I finally put the pieces together as an adult, and here I am working on it now.
Yeah.
Well, Jen doesn't give herself quite the credit she deserves. She was busy designing and building custom circuitry for F-16s and F-18s.
Oh no, I wasn't designing it. I was just building it.
She was building custom circuitry for,
Uh-huh.
jet fighters at Boeing with a top secret clearance, and so she's not quite the the surfer girl that she seems to be.
That's top secret.
And Raffippy,
clearance.
I'm sorry, Raffippy's not here, but he has quite the career too in the military and
Mhm.
all of his accomplishments. So what
Yeah.
a translator that you got to work with early on.
Yeah, and he, we've stayed in touch all these years, and he was in the Army for I think 30 years as a engineer,
Yeah.
and he lives on the Big Island. He's not really retired, but he's still doing consulting work for one of the big Hawaiian electrical contractors, big commercial electrical contractor.
Yeah.
But he realizes that it's if we don't do it now, it's not going to get done. So
Yeah.
so that's
So
really
why don't we
Yeah,
open this up
we can do
to
that.
questions, comments, stories, and
Jet, like yourself, Jet, I also, growing up in Maine as a young man, when you speak of this old house, I mean, it was like the Bible. You'd watch that program and be a part of that whole thing. But then to discover Steve's real talent, the depth of this man and his research and what he had done, he'll always be known about as this old house. But I can tell you that this research that you're talking about today, Steve, I mean, this has legs. This stuff's going to go on for generations. So
yeah.
not if we don't get it out. Not if we
Well, you
don't
guys
dig
are
it out of
doing
the
it.
archives.
When we first
We're being
found
optimistic.
Steve in 2000,
Well, I went.
something about
So
that?
Laura did an interview with Steve back more than 20 years ago. And
Yeah, radio.
I was at the Institute in Santa Fe, and I went into Home Depot to get some building supplies. And I was picking out some molding, and shoulder to shoulder, Steve was standing there. And I looked over and I said, "Oh," I said, "My wife interviewed you." And he said, "Who?" I said, "Laura Lee." He said, "Where is she?" So she's over there. Let's go talk. And then we went to Steve's
So-
house and we spent time with him and had good discussions.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been a fun journey, and it's great to stay in touch. And then Steve has continued his work. And of course, he ends up in Maine, which is my,
We're home state.
yeah, exactly. So
I am so glad, Steve, that you're devoting the time to preserve this and that
Yeah.
this wonderful window of time that you had to learn, to be initiated, to be part of that clan, to accumulate this. What an
Well,
extraordinary.
you should really thank Jet, because she's
Thank you,
she's
Jet.
the
I'm
catalyst.
gonna get there.
I
Yeah.
mean, she said, "I'm really interested in this stuff,"
Yeah.
and
Oh, you got him going. So you're
What's
saying
that?
this is important, Jet. We need to do this. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and she's been doing it on an internship basis. I said, I don't have any money to pay you, but if you want to digitize the tapes, she said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So
Yeah.
she's just been doing it as a work of passion. She moved to Hawaii because she wanted to get closer to the archive. She has friends in Hawaii, but she's making this in her life. She's making this happen out of whole cloth. So
finding an archivist is so critical to this whole thing being successful. So yeah, just amazing, Jet, that you heard the call, that you
That you
stepped
answered the
forward.
call too.
Yeah, and answered
Yeah.
the call.
Well, I asked the question. The answer was just what it was.
Do we hear a magic chant? I want to hear a chant.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah. Jet, you have something you can play for us before we go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can play something from the head of one of there was Steve, would you like to talk a little bit about David Fanshawe?
yeah, so the film was part of the adventure series on PBS that ran for a couple of years, and one of the other films in the series was this by a guy named David Fanshawe, who I met on Satawal. He was a total nut. I mean, he was the definition of eccentric. And he'd been drifting all over the Pacific with a Nagra and a whole bunch of recording tape and professional microphones recording his deal. I think he had some, some family money, enough to keep body and soul together. And he would go all over the world, and he was basically a musicologist. So he would go all over the world recording these chants. And he's just one of these personalities where people just talk to him. He was really an amazing guy. So they did a film about, they did an adventure film about him. So he dubbed off a bunch of these tapes. I don't know that you can even find the tapes anywhere. Can you, Jet?
You have the only copies that I know of. His archive doesn't seem to have them.
Yeah. So he just dubbed off some cassettes and he said, here, take these. And the originals are, I guess I have some copies, but the originals, my originals are.
Body never got anywhere. His vast.
I don't know. I think he's dead now. He was a Brit.
David Fanshawe, yeah, he's died.
Yeah. So anyway, Jet has dubbed them all. I mean, digitized them, and she's going to play.
So here we go. Aeoweiung. That was Piailug chanting, and that was Aturo Segur, which is a chant, another navigational chant that you'd use at sea.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
Amazing. And,
Wow.
wow. Beautiful
Good
work.
flourish at
Clean
the
that up
end.
and clean that all up and get that quality.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Who's up first?
Let's go to some questions. Lelania, who's actually in Hawaii, I know. Put her on.
Hello.
Aloha from
Aloha.
Maui. Thank you. That was so interesting and fascinating. And thank you both for all the work you have done and are doing. I really appreciate it. My question is, so you talk about navigation to islands that they know that are under a certain star, so they know kind of which star island they're going to. But way back when they went from Tahiti, Fiji to Hawaii, did they know what star Hawaii was under? Or the mythology that I've heard is this is used as an example of, creative visualization, like you visualize where you want to be and they just went. But I was wondering if you have any comments on going someplace where you don't know where it is.
Well, I mean, as a navigator, I can say you can't do that. I mean,
but they did.
Especially
oh
tiny
yeah, but so did
islands.
Captain Cook. I mean, so did Saavedra,
Yeah.
so did Magellan. You can. So these are voyages of discovery, and how. So the great age of discovery from the Polynesian standpoint in the Pacific occurred during, I think it's called a little climactic optimum. If there's any climatologists in the group here, please jump in, where the westerlies were far more prevalent. And so rather than tacking upwind from islands in the west to islands in the east, they could have sailed downwind. And in fact, when I was on the island, there was a period of westerlies where you could sail downwind to targets that are in the east. It was a big ocean, and there were other cultures like the Chinese. When Magellan first came across Guam and Saipan, they were not at all surprised to see a Western rigged vessel with 4.5 sails. There's some speculation that Chinese had been all over Micronesia and parts of Polynesia, looking for tree-pang and sandalwood and whatever else they could find out there. So,
Or the Jomon going to the coast of Ecuador because they find pottery. Betty Meggers of the Smithsonian famously identifies the same pottery. So, yeah. But thank you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, voyages of discovery, are common. That's how we learn the world.
That's how they colonized, a quarter of the globe.
Yeah.
That way.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Elena. By the
Thank
way,
you.
lots of comments in the chat room. If you want to ask questions, do it verbally rather than me trying to read for you. I'd prefer. Betsy is up next. Betsy, let me see, get you here. There you are.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve. This is a beautiful, beautiful day for me to hear this, these legends. And I made a circumnavigation in the 80s, and we did have a lot of westerly wind then. So we were in a brigantine and using a sextant.
Which boat?
This was Brigantine Romance with Captain Kimberly. Anyway, I'm curious about whether you partner with the Polynesian Voyaging Society and their work. Seems
Well,
like
I've known Nainoa since he was a kid, and knew Pinky and Clorinda, and the founders of the Polynesian Voyaging Society. I've done some film work on, when they did Malama Hanua, they came to Maine, and I did a little short piece for the Island Institute about Malama Hanua. Their mission statement doesn't really overlap with what we're doing here. Although, Nainoa was trained by Piailug, and Piailug was, and Cesario, his youngest, or one of his younger kids, spent a lot of time in Honolulu with the Thompsons. I would love it if they did, but they're not really. They're focused on Polynesia and Hawaii in particular, and not really, the specific archive exegesis that we're doing.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I can see where the cross, the weaving of the educational outreach for your incredible work might, expand with theirs. That's my thought. And maybe there's a bridge builder or a wayfinder like me who could help that.
that we welcome all help, any help. So maybe you're on Maui and Jet's on the Big Island. So maybe and Thomas is on the Big Island. This is kind of their project, Jet and Thomas's. I mean, obviously it's mine too, but I part of my goal as a mentor is to, help Jet get herself launched.
Yeah.
Go Jet. I'll
Go
put my
Jet.
I'll put my contact stuff in the chat for you, Jet. Thank you so much for your time today. It's fascinating.
Good to see
Thank
you,
you.
Betsy. Good to see you,
Thanks,
Betsy.
Betsy.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
joining in. I'm going to take you off screen here. I'm going to go to Tony Hall next. Hi, Tony, you're up.
Oh, hi, thank you, Paul and Laura, Steve, and Jet. Just remarkable. I get a sense of magic about this. Not only that this is ephemeral, but somehow you felt it, and you had just the skills to be able to do it. The people skills, the recording skills, the navigation skills. I mean, how this all came together, it's a little bit unbelievable, but it is believable because things do come together. I simply wanted to say that have you ever thought about how could all of this happen? And if it hadn't happened, it would have been gone forever. How can this happen?
Well, there's a funny story that I'll tell you. I was, so I sailed, did these sailing trips, and I met my wife, who's still my wife, in Bequia in the Caribbean. And, we were going to hang out for a couple of weeks and have fun. And here we are 40 years later. She was working in Boston in the financial industry. And, I started to, I had just put together actually a proposal for a round the world voyage. This is at the time when you could get a 15% income tax credit on a commercial boat. So we were going to buy a Swan 65 and basically timeshare it to a bunch of different investors. And I was going to sail it around the world. And then the investors would come and join the boat at various ports of call around the world. And then we were going to sell the boat and figure out what to do next. So that all cratered during the early 80s when, the prime interest rate was at 24% and nobody wanted to do anything that was, that ambitious. So I said, well, maybe Micronesian navigation. So I started to dig into it more and thought, well, maybe I can actually go do this. And my wife finally said, look, either go get a job or get the heck out of here and go to Micronesia. And so that's really, she's shoved me out the door. And I got a little bit of funding from Pacific Resources Incorporated in Hawaii. You remember them, Betsy, way back when they funded Sam Lowe's film. And I got some funding from the Wenner-Gren Foundation for anthropological research, and Continental Air Micronesia gave me some free tickets, and I sort of cobbled it together and off I went. But I mean, it is the most extraordinary experience that I've had in my life, having done a lot of, pretty interesting stuff, done hundreds and hundreds of hours of television and other documentaries. And project after this was up in the Alaskan Arctic, where my grandfather was a missionary early in the century. And so, I've done a lot of stuff. And but this was, I think, to be there at just this moment in time. Any earlier, they wouldn't have taught me, because they would have thought, well, my son's going to come back and I'll teach him. Any later, and they were dead.
Mhm.
Yeah, so many things had to happen just perfectly, and it seems like they still are. So I'm really,
Let's hope so.
I'm really impressed at so many events coming together. And another totally off the track question, but I remember as a boy reading Kon-Tiki,
Oh yeah.
and I was so
I read all the
fascinated.
poor hired
Yeah.
books as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All hired all books.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I just I know this is different than that, but maybe in some way it's the same.
Well, everybody read Kon-Tiki, right? And you
Sure.
look at pictures of the Marquesas and dream about the South Pacific and And that, you know, Kon-Tiki is kind of what got me going on all of this. I mean, his science wasn't right, but, you know, his romance was very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a huge thank you
Thank you,
both
Tony.
for this presentation and that you just made it come together. You heard the message, and the same for Jet. You heard the message, and I love it when things come together. So
Yeah.
so it's a great.
Thank you.
I imagine Tony, as an astronomer, having this, seeing this indigenous view
Use
of
of
the
the
stars, the
stars.
use of the stars, the connecting points, which is sort of like your dream as a child that brought you to become an astrophysicist in the first place.
Well, it's the stars, the waves, the the ocean, all these things. I mean, this is Steve's journey and Jet's journey, but I've seen so many things happen that don't make any sense, but they do. And, and I love this example of it. So thank you again.
Yeah,
I think we need to remember that boats are easily built. Maybe not all ocean-going vessels, but boats were easily built, and waterways are a highway. They're easy. They're migration routes where you can hug ashore, and basically the kelp beds full of fish and protein, and a way to navigate. We've got to understand that boats were made early on, and that they helped populate the globe.
And here in the Northwest, where we're at now in the Salish Sea, their ability to build these giant, tremendous canoes, and the way that they were navigating the waterways, and I mean, it's right here in the land that we sit on, or in the area that we're standing today. So
and how durable the boats are. I mean, they talk about building the Viking boats because they use the grain of the hull, which was the strength of the boat. And how was the canoe building there, Steve? You had a whole experience with that.
So it starts with, I mean, one of the things that endeared me to Piailug was that I knew how to run a chainsaw and sharpen it and everything else. Yeah. So great, you know how to, great. So saw this log in half. It's a big log.
Tree? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big
Bring
log.
your own chainsaw?
No, he had one. He brought one back from Hawaii. A big Pwitack, which was actually a pretty good saw at that time. So first you have to get the material. It's like any building project. So you have to mill your own wood. So we split this thing in half, and then that provided two big planks, and then it's all built by eye. There's no, Western vessels, a traditional way of building a Western vessel, the traditional way of building a Western vessel is to scale it from a model, and you loft it on the floor full size. So you've got water lines. So if you picture a hull like this, you're cutting it into water lines or sections like that. And then you've got stations. So the boat's like this, and you're cutting it into stations like this. And you can smooth in between those points and generate a complex shape of a hull. So there's no table of offsets or line drawings for these canoes there have been people have recreated them, but they don't exist. So you have the canoe builder, the Semnap, who's standing there, and Piailug was a canoe builder as well. And so you rough out the shape of one of the planks, which is what you see happening here. The next one, you can see those shapes. This is not the same boat. This is a different boat. We split it in half. Oh, sorry, I was looking at my screen, not yours.
So wooden stakes that you're.
They're wedges. I mean,
you would split.
So it's like splitting it's like using a iron wedge or steel wedge to split a log.
Yeah.
So that's split in half. The next slide, I think, shows starting to carve it with adzes. And then if you advance to the next slide, you've got the base log, which is the keel down at the bottom there. Sometimes if you have a big enough log, you can use the whole log for the keel in the first plank, which we would call the garboard plank. And if you don't, then you have to patch it together. And then this one has three strakes, three big planks, and then the bow piece, which is also the stern piece as well. what you're seeing here is they get basically glued together with palm sap, kind of it's a caulking made of boiled down coconut palm sap and coconut husk is kind of the caulking. And then it gets caulked with a mortar that they make from firing the coral. So it actually forms mortar. So it's being wedged together and it'll set, and then they'll lash it permanently with coconut fiber rope.
Mm.
I think a lot of old boats had a netting around them to help keep them together. If you go back in history too, cordage to help the reed boats of the Egyptians. And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, it was the only, it was
Incas.
without steel or metal fasteners, copper, any kind of way to fasten it together using steel, then you used what you had at hand, which is some sort of
Clever.
fiber rope. And this is
Did
coconut
it
fiber
leak?
rope.
And then
What's that?
Did it leak?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Failing. Steve, what
Looks-
was the
Looks like
tree?
crazy. That was called rugger, which is I think it's a species of mahogany. I think Jet, you actually drilled down and figured out what species it is, right?
Actually, Rooker, I still haven't that, and that's the only one that I haven't nailed down yet.
It works like mahogany. It's a really nice wood.
Yeah.
It looks like mahogany. It's very silky. It is easily worked with woodworking tools. So
did they have chants about taking down the tree and honoring the tree?
yeah,
Those-
they do. Yeah, there's a bunch of
Very
stuff, protocols that you have to follow to
Mhm.
thank the spirits of the tree. And
Mhm.
I mean, some of those, there was still Soundwear, one of those guys with the headdress. He finally decided that he better come clean and record all of his stuff. He was pretty coy for a long time, said, no, I don't know any of that stuff. But he finally realized that he might not have another chance. Hey, Tom.
He made it?
Is it Tom? All right.
All right, let's put Tom on. I'm sorry that, so this is
Yeah.
Thomas
I'm really
Raffippy.
sorry. Screwed up all the time.
Ah,
I'm really sorry, everybody. Yeah.
Well, we went through the slideshow, which you saw. We went through the same slideshow that I gave to the
Right.
Naval Academy.
Right.
And so you've seen that. So talk a bit about, and if you want to put up those slides again, go back to.
just give me a slide number and I'll do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, you got to go to slide 16 and
Okay.
talk about that
Oh,
one.
I see. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's-
you found the
that's my
prettiest girl
wife.
in school, huh?
Yeah. That's my wife, Marcy. She and I were, we were classmates in high school. We were all friends. My class, all of us, all the classmates, were 41 of us. And in our particular section, supposedly the advanced group, they had the 41 senior class divided us up into three sections. The advanced, they call A, B, C. We were section A. I was not really their classmates from freshmen, because as you know, I ran away from school for 2 years because I wanted to be part of what Steve was doing. My first year in high school, I thought it wasn't really that good because, I thought that all the students were just as serious as me. We were supposed to all go to school, but I went down there. I found out that they spent a lot of time, boys chasing girls, girls chasing boys. But I wasn't be part of that. I didn't want to be part of it. I wanted to learn something better. So I decided to go back home and learn navigation, canoe building, all of that stuff that Steve was able to record. And then Steve came, and then I got really excited because Steve was doing the same exact thing that I was doing. When my brother came, my brother Matthias came and found me on the island and asked me what I was doing. I said I was doing the best thing of my life, which was learning the traditional skills and knowledge. Then he told me, well, he passed through the islands to Ulithi, and then found out, I was in Ulithi, and then the principal and the school principal, vice principal, and the counselor were all his classmates in Xavier High School. They told him that they looked through the records and found that I was like a perfect student. I was a 4.0 student, true, and they didn't know why I quit school, and they didn't know why I never returned to school. And so they asked him to come up and find out why I left school. Then he came out and I told him that I was learning something way better than I could be learning in high school. Then he said, no, you need to go back to school and finish your school. That's why I went back in '84, went back to finish up my school. But that's when I met up with Marcy. Well, she went on to, she became a nun. And then I went on with my life, and I got orders to go to Iraq, and I was the first sergeant. I was leading a 164 man unit, and I got my orders that I had to go to Iraq, but I have to come up with a family plan because I was a single parent at that time. I had to come up with a family plan to take care of my 3 boys. And lo and behold, I got a phone call one night, and it was from Marcy, and she was at grad school at UH Manoa. And so I called her up and I said, hey, how about you come in, I'll take care of my kids while I go to war. And everything else all became history after that. So she was not somebody that I wasn't familiar with. She's very smart. In fact, I think before I came along in the class, I think she was the top of the class, her class. But when I came along, so she and I were co-leading the class. So it was good.
So Paul, if you go to slide 43, this is that picture of Pwitack, Tom. So if you could talk about
Pwitack was a very, very special man to me. He married my dad's sister. Puma is my dad's sister. My dad and Pwitack's wife, Mau's mom, they were all brothers, sisters. And again, another man named Santos Sapladi married a woman from Wolfhanu. So there are 4 of them, 2 boys and two girls.
Yeah.
Pwitack was actually from Puluat, originally from Puluat.
43.
And right there, that's him. Yeah.
So there's if you click it again, there's Paul, and then Tom, talk about this.
Yeah. Very special man, originally from Puluat. There was the last one. There was Etong. Yayane liana Roman. Selifato inargaraman. Bandingangali o buchan buchu tiper po na fariwach. that is a that is an Etong when you want to unite the chiefs, so that the chiefs will say all the same thing. This is when you know that they're not speaking of the same voice. It is really critical on Satawal Island, like Satawal, it's really critical that the chiefs, the Manilug are the second in line to assume the chief position. It's really critical that all of them are the same. They're all on the same page. And whenever the people on the bottom, whenever we feel that the chiefs are not of the same, they're not saying the same thing, they're not on the same page. It is really important that we really feel it. Those of us down they call Aeoweiung or the commoners. When we feel that, we can feel it because we're very confused. Instructions coming down from the chiefs is very confusing. Then we say this in a very respectful way, compel them to be united in how they lead us for that one. So that one particular Etong says, literally, I'm gonna say it literally, and and it says, where is that lady? The lady named Leirumon. So you guys gotta listen to this. It's really critical. Why you said the lady? It's a lady because we always believe that when the brothers and the men are confused, it is the responsibility of the ladies, the sisters, and to unite us. Where is this lady named Leirumon? Irifato meaning, I hope for that lady in Leirumon to pull a feather of that white, what is
Egret.
Yeah, egret, yeah, that's the one. The white feather of the egret bird. So it can, just that one feather, it can just give us one feather in this time of darkness. That one feather will light up this darkness in the heart. So it's just kind of interesting that if you look at it in the hierarchy of the society like ours, the lineage of the woman is what we identify ourselves with, but the men they lead. The men presides. But whenever we hit the darkness, whenever we come to a very a challenging time, we turn back to the ladies. The ladies are the one that they have always their mind always clear. So while a lot of people look at our society, they said, "Hey, you guys are sexist," or because men are always, men are this. The women always have to bow down, always respect the men. But when you really think about it, when in times of challenging times, we turn back to the ladies to be the one to offer the light, and that's why these Etong really clearly define that
So
we turn to the ladies.
Remind them of their
Talk-
higher duty.
Well, it's matrilineal and matrilocal society. So women and title descend through the title, and ownership of the land descend through the women's line and not the men's line. When you get married, you go live in your wife's village and not in your own. And if you're the chief by virtue of who your mother is and not who your father is. Yeah,
Right.
so at the end of the day, they have the upper hand. So talk a little bit about when he taught us, because that was kind of one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever experienced. I mean,
Yeah, it was that's how it tells us the value of the knowledge that he was about to teach me and Steve. When I was learning that from him earlier, it was at night. We were lying down, really dark. We didn't have no lamp, nothing, no lantern. But when the time for me, he was imparting that knowledge to me and Steve. was during the day. And he was so, like, he was kind of paranoid about it. That's how valuable that thing it was. He wanted us to make sure that there's no, our door was shut. And as you could see, right through the thatch, you get all the thatch walls. There's holes, and there is not like you shut the door and nobody will hear what you're talking about.
Because all the little kids are gathered around outside.
Yeah,
trying to listen.
Yeah, all the little kids outside, because we tell them, hey, all you kids get out of here. And you see that all the kids were outside because they wanted to know what we were doing, especially with Steve. They were so curious about Steve. This white man here, he has all these gadgets in his hands. What are these? They're looking at it. They want to see what it is that he was doing. That they were just curious. So their kids were outside. But the main thing, he wanted to make sure that there were no adults to hear what he was about to say. But the beauty of that thing was that he left a charge with me and Steve. That when he's passing on that knowledge to me and Steve, that we hold it in with such value, same value that he has. It's a valuable, very, very valuable knowledge that he was about to pass on to me and Steve.
And then he died the next, I mean, not too long after that, he died.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't know if I ever told you this, Thomas. I think I did, but I woke up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night in Massachusetts and dreaming about Pwitack. And then word came back to me. I don't know if you told me or somebody else, but word got back to me that he had died. So I think it was when he was passing on that I had the dream. Yeah. So the other one, if you go to slide 85, that's Aeoweiung. You want to talk about Aeoweiung, Thomas?
Yeah. Aeoweiung was a very, very knowledgeable man. Very, very steep in the culture, steep in the very wide range of areas that he knew about. He knew about to call the logs. Logs. When we talking about logs, we think about fish. So it's really critical when he can call logs. He can call in tuna. He can call the breadfruit. By the way, one of my boys, my second one, his Satawal's name is named after something in Katome, calling breadfruit. That's Solian. Solian is, I came to think about it, I think it's Halley's Comet.
Oh, could be.
Because that, the way they look at it is they look at the picker and the star is the breadfruit. And they said it comes around once in a while around, they said it's really close to 100 years. So the next time it comes around is about 100 years. And whenever it comes around, so there will be a really fruitful breadfruit season. And the last time it came around was in the late 80s or early 90s. I forgot the last time I was here. Halley's Comet. I mean, Satawal was just full. The breadfruits were just full. So I was telling my friend, I said, my friend was he was an astronomy student at the UH Hilo. It was the same time I was still at UH Hilo. I told him, hey, can you just go and study the phenomenon, the relationship between the Halley's Comet with Earth, with breadfruit? Because there's got to be some connection, because I told him my ancestors who possess that knowledge, they know that whenever Solian, that's the name, like Solian, whenever Solian appear in the east, there's going to be a very, the breadfruit are just loaded. And I don't know why, but they believe that when Solian come, the breadfruit are very fruitful. But Aeoweiung, I gotta say, Aeoweiung was he know Mau. You know, I don't remember Mau, Steve.
Yeah.
Mau, they never danced. They never danced at Mau since the 70s. He know all that from all the dances, all the songs from the beginning to the end. He know every single one of them. And you know, Aeoweiung was always wanted to share. He wanted to dance. He wanted to do that dance so that the young people will learn. And he was very, very right on. You know, he kept saying, we need to do Mau. We need to do Mau so that he could. And all these songs and dances were all about navigation, all legends about navigation. And it was really sad that every time he would advocate do Mau, and all the kind of younger guys would say, no need, not young guys like, well, not my age at that time, but I guess the guys that were kind of semi young, maybe probably in their 40s, and at that time they didn't want it because I don't know how the dances at night. We would dance, the men would be dancing, and the ladies would be covering themselves with sheets, and they would come in and they would give the men the lace. And of course, you know, you wouldn't know who these ladies are because they're just all covered, and they'll come in and give lace. And of course, I guess the girls, they also give lace to their friends, to their boyfriends, and that's the part that a lot of men, they didn't like, because, you know, I guess because they saw how it was when they were young, and they didn't like the younger guys just experience the same thing that they experienced during their prime time. So I told them that you guys are junk. You guys are junk because you didn't give us the opportunity to experience the same thing that you guys experienced when you guys were young. But they would always say, "Oh no, it's all Christianity. We're all Christians. We cannot do that." I said, "Well, if we're all Christians, then we shouldn't be doing what you guys had in your mind. You know, your mind shouldn't be in the gutter." But if you guys say we're all Christians, so why don't we just all do it? Let's do it so we can. But I was lucky that I was able to be part of it when I was young. I used to be one of those young kids that would keep the fire on, because there's a fire pit right in the middle, and we will be dancing around the fire. That's our light.
Wonderful.
So I think talk a little bit, Tom, about the importance of doing what we're, you know, the archive.
Good.
I mean, you said we've got to do something about this. When I saw you, I don't know, 4 years ago on the Big Island, we
Yes.
started talking about this, and
Yes.
it's so talk about the importance of doing this now.
Yeah, Steve, I cannot tell you how valuable these materials are. From when I read the book, The Last Navigator, you know, and you said that too, that this is just really sliver of what's in the archive, you know, and me being firsthand, seeing knowing what we recorded, what you recorded. I know that this is very critical that we put this down on. First of all, we preserve the records that you have. We need to preserve them in a way that it can stand time, hundreds and thousands of years from now, so that it can be preserved. Because that's the culture of a people, that if we don't preserve it, it's going to be lost forever, and a culture of a people will be lost. It became very evident to me when I went back to Satawal after I came back from the war, and I saw the suffering in the Middle East, and I saw I saw the culture that I have. I just knew that people are taking it for granted. The people on Satawal, they take it for granted that they're living in a culture where they don't really need to worry about. And I told Steve and Jet that my heart just broke when I went to Satawal in 2015. I saw it in 2005 when I went to Satawal, but it was not so evident until I went back in 2015. Just 10 years span. Normally, when the men gathered to drink their tuba in the afternoons and in the evenings, because they drink twice a day. They drink in the afternoon from the catch that they get in the morning, and they drink again in the evening. So every day they drink twice, they gather twice. And normally during my time when Steve and I were there, every time they drink, they would be singing, chanting the chants of the navigators, the navigation trips, the voyages that they took, and Steve recorded some. So that's the picture that I had in my mind of Satawal when men gathered themselves together. When I went back in 2015, it was so sad that I went down to the group of the men from Roputu, our canoe house. Steve and I were very familiar with our canoe house, Roputu. When I went down, they had one stereo. They had one stereo in the middle of the group, right next to the guy that is serving the tuba. He served the tuba and the radio operator. It was so sad that they were listening to radios, then stereos, they were CDs, and they were. And I sat there and I did, this is insane. I said, hey, stop, just stop.
Mhm.
Turn that thing off. So they turned off, and I started one chant, and I started this chant. And then Fiti was able to, when I was chanting, Fiti, he's a chief right now, passed by. And then they called him in to come and take one shot, 2 cups. He came and sat down. Then he was singing along with me. And he was singing along with me, and he forget, stop here. And then he maybe remember part of it as I was continue sing along. And when the chant was done, and everybody was just so quiet, and he said, Tom, I couldn't believe that you haven't been on the island for so long. You've been away from the island for so long, yet you still remember all these. And I said, you know what? It is so sad for me to come back and see this, that you guys would be listening to stereo, listening to pop music, listening to reggae music, when we had our own music, that you guys are not singing our music anymore.
Mm.
And I just remember that there's a depository of things recording that Steve and I were part of that is stored somewhere. I said, this has to be preserved. This has to be preserved, it has to be published so that these people can stop doing what they're doing. They're on a train wreck trip right now. And we gotta take these things and give it back to them to at least reorient them, or hopefully, and let them sail back under the stars of the traditional stars, instead of going down this trip that they're gonna go, and the island, they're gonna come to a point. It's gonna be they're going really fast right now to a destination of nowhere. And I think that these recordings that Steve made, I think these are gonna be. So I'm getting emotional.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very, very important for the survival of this society,
Yeah.
these people.
Yeah.
You wonder where the whole world is going. A trip to,
Raffippy, so important. And what you're saying, maybe
In just 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, it's ridiculous, really, really ridiculous how much they have lost. And from 1984 to 2005, I thought it was really bad. The change that I saw. It wasn't as bad between 2005 and 2010. It was terrible. The island, the culture is on a free fall. It's on a free fall. Then I told them that it's on a free fall. And if we don't do this, if we don't preserve this, and we don't give it back to them to adjust the sail and reorient their destination, they're on a free fall to
Not just navigate the seas, but navigate life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve has to go. Raffippy, what you're saying is so critical and so important about cultural preservation, and it's maybe something even broader that even as humanity, we're at a crossroads. We have lots of questions about what it is that we want to preserve and not preserve, and it's such an important, powerful message that you share with us today. Truly inspiring, and the strength of your message. I hope that rings true with you, not only with your people, but with all of us that need to look back at and reflect on
to
ourselves.
Reset our sights on where we're going.
It's time for a reset. It's time for a reset.
Yeah.
And reevaluation. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for jumping on today and being with us. And of course, Jet.
Thanks for all the great work that you're doing.
We're going to continue the conversations with you as you go along, and Steve, obviously will continue with you as well, and continue talking and sharing stories and explorations. And if we can be of support to you, what your mission is, we're here. What we can do, let us know.
It's also so important that when you hear the call, when you hear that still small voice within to say, come and go on this adventure, it might have great import. And so it's so interesting that all your lives intersected in this way. And you need to listen to those signs and signals within. This is about navigating life as well.
The voyage of life. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and close and say thank you all so much for joining us today.
Any last words?
Yeah, last words.
Last words,
Steve,
Jet, real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Calophyllum inophilum. That's my last words. Calophyllum inophilum. That's Fruger, Steve.
Yeah.
You'll have to translate that one, I'm afraid.
Calophyllum inophilum.
Yeah. Steve, any last words?
Well, I'd like to give Tom the last word. I mean, this is, I will say that, and I say this directly to Tom, and Tom, you know this, but I mean, I do feel personally that I was privileged to be able to be taught this knowledge by Piailug, by Urpa, by Pwitack, by Aeoweiung, by Otalig, by Samuel, by everybody, and to be, become a rei matau, a person of the sea. The people of the islands are called the rei matau, which is people of the sea. It was an extraordinary gift, and I feel that I have a responsibility. Well, I do have a responsibility to make sure that it lives on. And so I would like to thank Tom for being my friend for all these years. And I'd like to thank Jet for basically taking the road not taken.
Yeah, you know what? As I said earlier to you, Steve and Jet, I believe we have the right. I believe we have the right people to do this. Without Steve, this project is not going to be. Not just the project, but the people of Satawal will look at all these stuff. It wouldn't mean anything to them. They wouldn't really understand. Without me, I wouldn't be able to put it in a current orthography, semi-standard orthography that kids nowadays understand. So it would be meaning to a lot of them, because they will be looking at it, getting frustrated because they know something is important there, but they wouldn't understand. So Steve is so correct that he was there in a window, probably the last window, to record what was Satawal, what was everybody knew as Satawal. So this recording is so important, and I believe that now is the time to do it, because Jet has the heart, she has the motivation to help Steve and I put this thing together, put it forward. Steve and I cannot do this by ourselves. So thank you all. And again, I'm sorry, very sorry for.
No
being
worries.
messed
But
up with the time.
I just want to say it's not just for the people of Satawal. I think it's for the people of the world to preserve all of our indigenous elders, all of our collective wisdom. We're one family, and there's many books to put back on the shelf. So thank you for yours.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Steve and Jet, as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
all for listening today.